The sky above the Velari homeworld was on fire. Orange and red flames spread across the clouds as enemy ships dropped bombs on the cities below. Buildings that had stood for thousands of years crumbled into dust. The screams of millions filled the air, mixing with the sound of explosions and the roar of attacking vessels. Ambassador Telos crawled through broken glass and twisted metal. His thin body was covered in cuts and burns. His crystalline skin, which normally glowed with soft blue light, was now dim and cracked. Every movement sent pain shooting through his fragile bones. But he could not stop. He would not stop. His people needed him. The communications tower lay in ruins around him. Only one console still showed signs of life, its screen flickering with weak power. Telos pulled himself toward it with his three-fingered hands, leaving a trail of silver blood behind him. The Velari had never known war. For 10,000 years they had lived in peace. They were scholars and artists. They studied the stars and wrote poetry about the beauty of the universe. They had joined the Galactic Accord believing it would protect them forever. They had been wrong. The Krath Empire had come without warning. Their massive warships appeared in orbit 3 days ago, blocking out the sun. They demanded complete surrender. When the Velari refused, the bombing began. Telos reached the console and pulled himself up. His vision was blurry from blood loss, but he could still see the controls. His fingers moved across the buttons, entering codes he had memorized long ago. This was the emergency beacon, the last hope for his dying world. The signal was old technology, created centuries ago when the Galactic Accord was first formed. It was meant to call for help from allied races. Any member of the Accord who received it was honor-bound to respond. Telos pressed the final button and watched the transmission power up. But something was wrong. The damaged equipment sparked and crackled. The frequency numbers on the screen jumped wildly, changing faster than Telos could follow. A panel exploded near his head, showering him with hot sparks. The signal launched into space, but it was not the signal he had intended. The corrupted transmission burst outward at speeds faster than light. It passed through star system after star system, crossing thousands of light years in seconds. It should have reached the peaceful worlds of the Accord. Instead, it punched through a dimensional barrier that had been sealed for 100 years. The signal entered Sector 7G, the quarantine zone, Earth space. 4,000 light-years away, aboard the United Earth defense carrier Eternal Horizon, Captain Kim Ti-ho was enjoying a quiet evening. He sat in his private quarters, drinking coffee and reading reports from the outer colonies. His ship was on routine patrol near the edge of human territory. Nothing exciting had happened in weeks. Ti-ho was 52 years old. His face was hard and weathered, marked by a long scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw. He had earned that scar during the Jupiter insurrection, when rebel forces tried to break away from Earth's government. He had fought in 3 wars during his career and had seen things that still haunted his dreams. But he had also seen humanity at its best. He had watched soldiers sacrifice themselves to save strangers. He had seen enemies become friends when they realized they were not so different after all. The alarm shattered the silence. Red lights flashed across his quarters as the ship's warning system screamed to life. Ti-ho was on his feet before the first sound faded. He grabbed his uniform jacket and ran for the bridge. Lieutenant Park Hana was already at her station when he arrived. She was young, barely 30, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her fingers flew across the holographic displays in front of her, pulling data from sensors scattered across a dozen systems. "Report," Ti-ho ordered, taking his place in the command chair. "Unknown transmission, sir," Hana said without looking up. "Origin point is approximately 4,000 light-years from our position. The signal uses Galactic Accord encryption codes." Ti-ho felt his eyebrows rise. The Galactic Accord. He had not heard that name spoken on a human ship in decades. The Accord was a collection of alien civilizations that controlled most of the known galaxy. They had discovered humanity 100 years ago and had immediately declared Earth a Class 5 death world. To the aliens of the Accord, Earth was a nightmare. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was filled with dangerous gases. The weather was violent and unpredictable. And the dominant species, humans, had evolved through millions of years of constant warfare. They drank poison for pleasure. They kept dangerous predators as pets. They had split the atom and used it to destroy their own cities. The Accord had decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist among the stars. They had placed Earth under quarantine, sealing off an entire sector of space and forbidding any contact with humans. For 100 years, humanity had been alone, building their civilization in isolation while the rest of the galaxy pretended they did not exist. "Can you decode the transmission?" Tiho asked. Hana nodded. Her fingers danced across the controls. A moment later, a voice filled the bridge. It was weak and distorted, but the words were clear enough. "This is Ambassador Telos of the Velari Collective. Our world is under attack. The Krath Empire has invaded. Millions are dying. We beg any allied race to send help, please. We cannot survive alone." The message repeated. Again and again, the desperate voice pleaded for salvation. Tiho listened in silence, his face showing no emotion. But inside, his heart was beating faster. "Sir," Hana said slowly, "the Velari were one of the races that voted to quarantine us. They called humanity a plague that should be contained." "I remember," Tiho replied. "So what do? The Accord made it clear they want nothing to do with us. This message was not meant for human ears." Tiho stood up and walked to the main viewport. Through the reinforced glass, he could see the distant stars glittering in the endless darkness. Somewhere out there, a world was burning. People were dying. Children were screaming for parents who would never come. The Accord had abandoned humanity. They had treated his species like monsters, locking them away like dangerous animals in a cage. Part of him wanted to ignore the signal. Let them suffer. Let them learn what it felt like to be alone. But that was not who he was. That was not who humanity was. "Open a channel to Fleet Command," Tiho ordered. "Tell Admiral Choi that we have received a distress signal from outside the quarantine zone. Civilians are under attack. Millions of lives are at stake." Hana hesitated. "Sir, if we respond to this signal, we will be violating the quarantine. The Accord could see it as an act of war." Tiho turned to face her. A cold smile crossed his scarred face. "The Accord called us Deathworlders. They said we were too dangerous, too violent, too savage to be trusted among civilized races." He sat back down in his command chair. "Let us show them exactly how dangerous we can be when we choose to protect the innocent." He activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice echoed through every ship in the patrol group. "All vessels, this is Captain Kim Tiho of the Eternal Horizon. We have received a distress call from beyond the quarantine zone. A peaceful world is being destroyed. Millions of civilians face death. I am ordering an immediate course change. We are going to help them." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I know what the galaxy thinks of us. I know they fear us. But today, we will show them something they never expected. We will show them that the Deathworlders of Earth do not abandon those in need. Set course for the Velari system. Maximum speed." The engines of the Eternal Horizon roared to life. Around it, a dozen other ships changed course, falling into formation. The small patrol group began its journey across the stars. But they were not alone. The message had been heard by other human ships. Across the quarantine zone, captains made the same decision. Fleets changed course. Soldiers prepared for battle. Within hours, hundreds of vessels were racing toward the Velari system. The galaxy had locked humanity away and forgotten about them. They had called them monsters and hoped they would never return. They were about to remember why. Fleet Commander Vorak stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his victory unfold. Through the massive viewport, he could see the Velari homeworld below. Fires burned across every continent. Smoke rose from destroyed cities like gray fingers reaching toward the sky. His fleet of 300 warships held perfect formation in orbit, raining destruction on the helpless world. Vorak was a Krath warrior, born and bred for conquest. He stood 8 feet tall, his body covered in thick green scales that could stop a knife blade. 4 yellow eyes scanned the tactical displays around him. 2 powerful arms hung at his sides, while 2 smaller arms worked the controls of his command chair. The Krath had conquered 17 worlds in the past decade. The Velari would be number 18. "Commander," his tactical officer called out, "ground forces report that resistance has ended in the northern continent. We control 60% of the planet." Vorak made a sound of satisfaction deep in his throat. "Excellent. Continue the bombardment of the remaining cities. I want full surrender by morning." The Velari had been easy prey. They had no military, no weapons worth mentioning. Their entire civilization was built on the foolish idea that peace could last forever. Vorak almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "Commander," the voice of his sensor officer cut through his thoughts. There was fear in that voice, fear that Vorak had never heard before from one of his crew. "What is it?" "Long-range sensors are detecting something strange. Multiple faster-than-light signatures are approaching from the galactic east." The officer's 4 hands trembled as he worked his console. "The signatures are coming from the quarantine zone." Vorak's eyes narrowed. "That is impossible. Nothing lives in the quarantine zone. The Accord sealed that sector 100 years ago." "I know, Commander, but the readings are clear. Ships are coming, many ships." Vorak walked to the sensor station and looked at the display himself. The officer was right. Dozens of signatures were appearing on the edge of their sensor range. Then dozens more. Then hundreds. "How many?" Vorak demanded. The officer's voice was barely a whisper. "Current count is 400 and rising. Commander, what could possibly—" He never finished his sentence. The darkness of space in front of the Krath fleet suddenly tore open. It was as if reality itself was being ripped apart. Hundreds of ships burst through the tier, emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. They were unlike any vessels Vorak had ever seen. Black and angular, they looked like blades designed to cut through the void. Their hulls were covered in weapons, more weapons than any ship should be able to carry. Each vessel bore the same symbol on its side, a pale blue sphere surrounded by branches of some plant. Vorak did not recognize the symbol, but somewhere deep in his memory, stories from his childhood began to surface. Tales that older Krath had whispered around fires late at night. Stories about a sealed sector of space. Stories about a world so dangerous that even the Accord feared it. Stories about the Deathworlders. "No," Vorak breathed, "it cannot be." Admiral Choi Yangsu stood on the bridge of his command ship, the Divine Fury. He was 63 years old, with silver hair cut short in military style. His face was calm, almost peaceful as he watched the Krath fleet through his viewport. He had been a soldier for 40 years. He had fought in more battles than he could count, but he had never faced aliens before. Today would be different. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "all ships have arrived and are in formation. The fleet is ready." Enemy count: 300 Krath warships, various classes. Their flagship appears to be the large vessel in the center of their formation. Choi nodded slowly. The humans were outnumbered, but not by much, and numbers were not everything. "Open a channel to all Krath vessels," he ordered. "Let them know who we are." The channel opened. Choi straightened his uniform and faced the camera. His image would now be appearing on every Krath bridge. "This is Admiral Choi Yong-soo of the United Earth Navy," he said. His voice was calm and steady, like a teacher explaining something simple to a child. You are engaged in the murder of innocent civilians. You have one chance to withdraw your forces and leave this system. If you refuse, you will face the consequences of your actions." He paused, letting his words translate across the stars. "We are humans. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day of our existence. We evolved through fire and blood and endless struggle. We do not know how to surrender. We do not know how to lose." A small smile crossed his face. "And we do not show mercy to those who harm the innocent. Choose wisely." The channel closed. For a long moment there was only silence. Then the Krath fleet opened fire. Thousands of weapons activated at once. Plasma beams, nuclear missiles, graviton torpedoes, energy cannons. Every weapon the Krath possessed screamed across space toward the human fleet. The attack was massive. It was overwhelming. It should have destroyed the human ships instantly. The weapons struck the human shields. The shields flickered with blue light for a moment. Then the light faded and the human ships remained untouched. On the bridge of the Divine Fury, Choi watched the attack wash over his fleet like water over stone. His shield officer reported that damage was less than 2%. The Krath weapons were simply too weak to penetrate human defenses. "Admiral," Captain Kim Tae-ho said through the communication link from the Eternal Horizon, "permission to return fire." "Permission granted," Choi replied. "Show them what Deathworlders can do." The human fleet responded as one. Railgun rounds accelerated to half the speed of light crossed the distance between fleets in heartbeats. They punched through Krath shields like they were made of paper. Plasma lances cut warships in half with single shots. Missile swarms tracked and destroyed targets with perfect accuracy. The Krath had never faced an enemy like this. Their weapons were designed to fight other Accord races that had evolved on gentle worlds with low gravity and calm weather, races that had never needed to develop true military technology because the Accord kept the peace. Humanity had evolved on Earth, a world with crushing gravity, a world with violent storms, extreme temperatures, and predators around every corner. For millions of years, humans had fought to survive against everything their planet threw at them. And when they finally reached the stars, they brought that fighting spirit with them. The 100 years of quarantine had not weakened humanity. It had made them stronger. Cut off from the rest of the galaxy, they had developed their own technology. They had built ships and weapons without the limitations of Accord regulations. They had prepared for the day when they would face the universe again. That day had come. Vorak watched his fleet die around him. Ships exploded in every direction. Distress calls flooded the communication channels. His warriors, who had never known defeat, were screaming in terror as human weapons tore through their vessels. "How is this possible?" he roared. "They are just one species, one primitive species from a single planet." His tactical officer was crying now, his 4 eyes streaming with tears. "They are not primitive, Commander. They are Deathworlders. The stories were true. The stories were all true." A human destroyer slipped through the chaos of battle like a shadow. Its captain, Baek Jinho, had been waiting for this moment. His ship, the Soul's Vengeance, was smaller than the Krath flagship, but size meant nothing when you had speed and precision. "Target the flagship's engine section," Jinho ordered. "Fire on my mark." His crew responded without hesitation. Humans had evolved as pack hunters, working together to bring down prey much larger than themselves. That instinct was written into their DNA. Every member of Jinho's crew knew their role. Every action was coordinated with perfect timing. Fire! 3 railgun rounds struck the Krath flagship in exactly the same spot. The first round broke the shields. The second cracked the armor. The third penetrated the engine core. Vorak's ship tore itself apart from the inside. The explosion lit up the darkness of space like a new star. 300 Krath warriors died in an instant, including Fleet Commander Vorak himself. The remaining Krath ships tried to flee. They had come to slaughter helpless civilians, They had not expected to face monsters from beyond the quarantine. But the humans were not finished. Admiral Choi watched the enemy fleet scatter. He thought about the millions of Velari who had died before his ships arrived. He thought about the cities burned, the families destroyed, the children who would never grow up. "Admiral," his executive officer said quietly, "the remaining craft vessels are attempting to retreat." Choi was silent for a long moment. In human history, there had been times when retreating enemies were allowed to escape. There had also been times when mercy was denied. This was one of those times. "No retreat," he said. "Not for them, not after what they did." The human fleet turned as one. They pursued the fleeing craft ships like wolves chasing wounded deer. By dawn, not a single enemy vessel remained. Below, on the burning surface of the Velari homeworld, survivors looked up at the sky. The enemy ships were gone. In their place, human vessels held protective orbit around their world. The Deathworlders had come, and against all expectations they had come as saviors. The drop pod screamed through the atmosphere of the Velari homeworld. Inside, Lieutenant Commander Song Yunbai checked her weapons one final time. Her power armor was sealed tight around her small frame, protecting her from the heat of re-entry. Around her, 11 other soldiers sat in silence, each preparing in their own way for what was to come. Yunbai was 34 years old. She stood barely 5 feet tall without her armor, the smallest soldier in her unit. But size meant nothing when you were wrapped in half a ton of advanced military hardware. She had fought in the Martian campaigns, the Belt Rebellion, and a dozen smaller conflicts. She had more confirmed kills than any other ground soldier in the Earth Defense Force. Her second-in-command, Sergeant Yoon D-sung, sat across from her. He was the opposite of Yunbai in many ways, tall and broad, with hands like dinner plates and a face that looked like it was carved from stone. But his eyes were kind, and he had a habit of telling terrible jokes before combat. "Hey, Commander," he said through their private communication channel, "what do you call a craft soldier who surrenders?" "I do not know, Sergeant." "Neither do I, never seen one do it." A few of the other soldiers laughed quietly. Private Lee Soo-min, the youngest member of the team, shook her head. "That was bad, Sergeant, really bad." "You will miss my jokes when I am gone," D-sung replied. The pod shuddered as it hit the lower atmosphere. Warning lights flashed red as the heat shield strained against the friction. Yunbai watched the altitude counter drop rapidly. 10,000 meters, 5,000, 1,000. "Brace for impact," she ordered. The pod hit the ground hard, digging a trench through dirt and rubble before finally stopping. The doors blew open, and Yunbai was moving before the dust settled. Her heads-up display immediately began identifying targets: 47 craft soldiers, 2 armored assault vehicles, multiple weapon emplacements. They had landed in what used to be a small town. Now it was ruins. Buildings lay in crumbled heaps. Fires burned everywhere. And in the center of the destruction, thousands of Velari refugees huddled together, surrounded by craft troops. The aliens had not started killing the civilians yet. They were waiting, probably for orders from their fleet, orders that would never come. 12 against 47, D-sung noted as he took position beside Yunbai. "Standard odds." "Too easy," Soo-min replied from her position on the left flank. Yunbai raised her railgun. Through her targeting scope, she could see the craft soldiers clearly. They were big, 7 feet tall at least, with thick scales and multiple arms. Each carried weapons that would kill an unarmored human instantly. But humans did not fight unarmored anymore. "Contact in 3, Yunbai said calmly. 2, 1. She fired. The first craft soldier's head disappeared in a spray of green blood. Before his body hit the ground, Yunbai had already moved to her second target, and her third, and her fourth. Her railgun sang a song of death, each shot perfectly aimed, each shot ending a life. The Krath finally realized they were under attack. They turned toward the human positions, raising their weapons, but they were too slow, so much too slow. On Earth, humans had evolved as persistence hunters. Their ancestors had chased prey across savannas for days at a time, never stopping, never resting, until their target collapsed from exhaustion. That same endurance now powered their combat reflexes. Where other species tired quickly in battle, humans could fight for hours without slowing down. Sung charged forward, his heavy weapon blazing. He moved like a dancer, each step placing him exactly where he needed to be. The Krath weapon's fire missed him by inches as he closed the distance. When he reached the first assault vehicle, he simply ripped its hatch open with his armored hands and threw a plasma grenade inside. The explosion lit up the ruins. Su Min worked the right flank with cold efficiency. She was young, only 22, but she had been born in the orbital habitats around Jupiter. Growing up in those cramped, dangerous stations had taught her to react quickly. Her shots were precise, each one finding the weak points in Krath armor that her training had identified. The battle lasted less than 3 minutes. When the last Krath soldier fell, the human squad stood among the bodies in silence. 47 enemies dead, 0 human casualties. It had not even been close. Yunbai lowered her weapon and surveyed the scene. The Velari refugees were still huddled together, staring at the human soldiers with wide, terrified eyes. They had watched the entire battle. They had seen how quickly and efficiently the humans killed. She understood their fear. The Galactic Accord had spent a century spreading stories about how dangerous humans were. Deathworlders, they called them, monsters from a nightmare planet, savage beasts who knew nothing but violence. Slowly, Yunbai reached up and removed her helmet. Her face was revealed, soft features, dark eyes, hair tied back in a practical bun. She looked nothing like a monster. A Velari child was watching her from the edge of the group. The child was small, barely reaching Yunbai's waist, with crystalline skin that should have glowed with bioluminescence. But the glow was faint, almost gone. The child was injured, maybe dying. Yunbai knelt down, bringing herself to the child's level. She reached into her supply pouch and pulled out a ration bar and a small medical injector. "It is okay," she said softly. Her translator converted her words into the Velari language. "You are safe now. We are here to help." The child did not move. Its large eyes were filled with terror. "I know you are scared," Yunbai continued. "I know you have heard terrible things about my kind. Maybe some of those things are even true, but I promise you right now, we are not your enemy. We came to protect you." She held out the ration bar. The child looked at it, then looked at her face. Something shifted in those large eyes. Fear began to fade, replaced by something else. Trust, maybe, or just exhaustion. The child reached out and took the food. Behind Yunbai, Ambassador Telos emerged from the ruins of a nearby building. He had been hiding there since the Krath occupied the town, watching his people suffer and waiting for death. Now he stood frozen, staring at the scene before him. A human soldier, a Deathworlder, one of the most feared beings in the galaxy, was kneeling in the dirt. She was feeding a Velari child, speaking to it gently, treating it with kindness that Telos had never expected to see from her species. He approached slowly, his damaged body aching with every step. Yunbai looked up at him and rose to her feet. "Ambassador Telos," she said, "I am Lieutenant Commander Song Yunbai of the Earth Defense Force. We received your distress signal. We are here to help." Telos struggled to find words. You came, even though the Accord." "We know what the Accord thinks of us," Yunbai said simply. "We know they fear us. Maybe they are right to be afraid. We are dangerous, Ambassador. We were forged by a world that tried to kill us from the moment we were born. We learned to fight because we had no other choice." She looked down at the Velari child, who was now eating the ration bar with desperate hunger. But being dangerous does not mean being evil. We choose what we do with our strength. Today, we choose to protect. Telos felt something he had not felt since the invasion began: hope. "How many of you are there?" he asked. "In my squad, 12, in orbit," Yunbai smiled slightly. "Over 400 ships. Admiral Choi sends his regards. The Krath fleet has been destroyed. Your world is safe." Safe, the word echoed in Telos's mind. He had thought he would never hear that word again. Around them, more human soldiers were arriving. Drop pods landed across the ruined town. Soldiers in power armor spread out, establishing perimeters and searching for survivors. Medical teams began treating injured Velari. Supply crates were unpacked, revealing food, water, and medicine. Telos watched in amazement. These Deathworlders, these monsters that the galaxy feared, were working to save his people. They asked for nothing in return. They made no demands. They simply helped. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why would you help us, after everything the Accord did to your people?" Yunbai was silent for a moment. She watched her squad members tend to the wounded, share their rations with hungry refugees, and carry injured children to medical stations. "Because someone needed help," she said, "and we could provide it. That is reason enough." Telos looked at the human soldier standing before him. He thought about all the stories he had heard about her species, the tales of violence and war, the warnings about their dangerous nature. He realized now that those stories had missed something important. They had described human strength but ignored human compassion. They had warned about human violence but forgotten human kindness. The Deathworlders were indeed dangerous. They had just destroyed an entire Krath fleet in less than an hour. They had killed 47 enemy soldiers in 3 minutes. But they were also capable of kneeling in the dirt to feed a frightened child. And that, Telos realized, was what made them truly terrifying. They could choose. They could choose to destroy or to protect, to kill or to heal, to hate or to love. And today they had chosen to be guardians. "Thank you," Telos whispered. "Thank you for coming." Yunbai nodded. "We are just getting started. There is much work to do." She put her helmet back on and turned to her squad. There were more survivors to find, more people to save. The battle for orbit was over, but the battle on the ground was just beginning. And the Deathworlders of Earth were only getting started. 3 days had passed since the human fleet arrived. The Velari homeworld was still burning in places, but hope had returned. Human ships held protective orbit, watching for any sign of Krath reinforcements. On the ground, human soldiers and medical teams worked without rest, pulling survivors from rubble and treating the wounded. Captain Kim Tiho stood in the ruins of what had been the Velari capital city. Around him, his crew worked alongside Velari volunteers, clearing debris and searching for anyone still trapped beneath the fallen buildings. The air was thick with dust and smoke, but the humans did not complain. They worked in shifts, around the clock, pushing their bodies to the limit. A young ensign approached Tiho with a data pad. "Captain, we have completed the preliminary casualty assessment." Tiho took the pad and read the numbers. His jaw tightened. 37 million dead. 37 million innocent lives, ended by Krath weapons before the human fleet could arrive. "And the survivors?" "Approximately 2 billion, sir. Many are injured, many more have lost everything, but they are alive." 2 billion saved. It should have felt like a victory. But Tiho could only think about the millions they had been too late to save. If they had received the signal sooner, if they had moved faster, if the Accord had not quarantined humanity in the first place. He pushed those thoughts aside. Regret would not help anyone now. "Continue the search and rescue operations," he ordered. "Every life matters. Do not stop until we have checked every building." The ensign nodded and hurried away. Tiho walked through the ruined streets, observing his crew at work. They were tired. He could see it in their faces, in the way they moved, but none of them asked to rest. None of them complained. They understood what was at stake. He found Commander Hwang Bora coordinating a medical station near the central square. She was directing teams of medics and surgeons, making sure everyone received the care they needed. Despite the chaos around her, she remained calm and focused. "How are we doing?" Tiho asked. Bora wiped sweat from her forehead. "We have treated over 50,000 patients in the last 3 days. Our medical supplies are running low, but I have already contacted the supply ships. More equipment is on the way." "Good work." "The Velari are grateful," Bora said. She paused, looking around at the injured aliens being cared for by human doctors. "They did not expect this. I think they expected us to demand payment or make political demands. When we just started helping without asking for anything, they did not know how to react." Tiho nodded. "They believed the stories about us. They thought we were monsters." "Can you blame them? The Accord has been spreading those stories for 100 years. "No, I cannot blame them." Tiho looked up at the sky, where human warships were visible as tiny points of light against the stars. "But I hope our actions speak louder than the Accord's words." In orbit, Admiral Choi Yong-soo faced a different kind of challenge. His communications officer had just informed him that they had received a transmission from the Galactic Accord Council. "They are demanding to know why we have violated the quarantine," the officer reported. "They are calling our actions illegal and threatening consequences." Choi leaned back in his command chair and allowed himself a small smile. "Let me speak with them." The main screen flickered to life, showing the Accord Council chamber. 12 alien beings sat in a semicircle, representing the most powerful races in the galaxy. They stared at Choi with expressions ranging from anger to fear. "Admiral Choi," the lead counselor began, "you have violated the sacred quarantine that has kept peace in this sector for a century. Your presence here is an act of war. Explain yourself." Choi remained calm. "Counselor, we received a distress signal from the Velari homeworld. They were being slaughtered by the Krath Empire. We responded to save lives. That is all. The signal was meant for Accord members, not for you. Your interference was not requested." "Tell me, Counselor," Choi said slowly, "did any Accord members respond to that signal?" Silence. "Did anyone send ships to protect the Velari?" More silence. 37 million people died before we arrived," Choi continued. 37 million innocent lives. And in those 3 days of slaughter, where was the Accord? Where were the great races who claimed to stand for peace and justice? The counselors shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. "You locked humanity away because you feared us. You called us dangerous and hoped we would stay in our corner of the galaxy forever. But when real danger came, when your own members needed protection, you did nothing." Choi's voice hardened. "We are Deathworlders. We are everything you feared. But today, we used our strength to save lives while you hid behind treaties and protocols." The lead counselor finally found his voice. "This is not over, Admiral. There will be consequences for your actions." "I look forward to discussing those consequences," Choi replied. "But for now, I have work to do. Billions of people need our help, and I will not waste time arguing with those who refuse to help them themselves." He ended the transmission. On the surface, the rescue operations continued. Lieutenant Commander Song Yunbai and her squad had moved to a new sector, searching through collapsed buildings for survivors. The work was exhausting, but Yunbai did not stop. She could not stop, not while people might still be alive under the rubble. Private Lee Soo-min approached her with a thermal scanner. "Commander, I am detecting heat signatures in that building. Faint, but definitely alive." Yunbai looked at the structure Soo-min was pointing to. It had been a hospital before the attack. Now it was a mountain of broken concrete and twisted metal. "How many signatures?" "At least 20, maybe more. They are deep inside, probably in the basement levels." Yunbai nodded. "Get the team together. We are going in." The next several hours were brutal. The human soldiers dug through rubble with their hands, using their power armor to lift debris that would crush normal beings. They worked in shifts, careful not to cause additional collapses that might harm the survivors below. Finally, they broke through to the basement. Inside, they found 32 Velari, including doctors, nurses, and patients who had been receiving treatment when the bombs fell. They were weak, dehydrated, and terrified, but they were alive. As the human soldiers helped them out of the ruins, one of the Velari doctors grabbed Yunbai's arm. His crystalline skin was cracked and dim, but his eyes were bright with tears. "You saved us," he whispered. "I thought we would die down there. I thought no one was coming." "We came as fast as we could," Yunbai replied. "I am sorry we were not faster." The doctor shook his head. "Do not apologize, you came. After everything our government said about your kind, you still came. I will never forget this." Yunbai helped him to the medical station, where human doctors immediately began treating his injuries. She watched for a moment, then turned back to the ruins. "Su Min, are there any more heat signatures in this area?" "Checking now, Commander." Su Min studied her scanner. "Yes, 2 more buildings about half a kilometer north." "Then we keep working." As night fell on the Velari homeworld, Ambassador Telos finally allowed himself to rest. He sat in a temporary shelter that the humans had constructed, eating food from their ration packs and drinking clean water that their ships had provided. Captain Tiho sat across from him. The human looked as tired as Telos felt, but there was a quiet strength in his eyes that never seemed to fade. "Your people are remarkable," Telos said. "I have watched them work for 3 days without stopping. They give everything they have, asking for nothing in return. I do not understand it." Tiho smiled slightly. "We are not as different from you as you might think. We value the same things: family, community, life. We just express those values differently. The Accord said you were violent, dangerous, unpredictable." "We are all of those things," Tiho admitted. "We can be cruel, we can be selfish. Our history is filled with wars and suffering that we inflicted on ourselves, but we are also capable of great kindness, great sacrifice, great love." He met Telos's eyes. "Every species has darkness inside them. What matters is what they choose to do with their light." Telos was quiet for a long moment. "The Accord Council has contacted us. They are angry about your presence here. They are talking about sanctions and punishments." "I know," Admiral Choi informed me. "What will you do?" Tiho looked out at the ruined city, where human lights still moved through the darkness, still searching for survivors. "We will keep helping. We will keep saving lives. And when the time comes to face the Accord, we will face them together." He turned back to Telos. "You are not alone anymore, Ambassador. Whatever happens next, humanity will stand with the Velari." Telos felt tears forming in his crystalline eyes. For the first time since the invasion began, he believed that everything might actually be okay. "Thank you, Captain." Tiho nodded. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we rebuild." Outside the shelter, the stars shone down on a world that had been brought to the edge of destruction. Human ships still orbited above, standing guard against any threat. Human soldiers still worked on the ground, refusing to stop until every survivor was found. The Deathworlders had come, and they had proven that strength could be used for protection as well as destruction, that the most dangerous beings in the galaxy could also be the most compassionate. The Accord had made a mistake when they quarantined humanity. They had assumed that isolation would make humans weaker. Instead, it had given them time to grow stronger, to prepare, to become something the galaxy had never seen before. Guardians wrapped in the armor of warriors, healers with the strength of conquerors, protectors who knew no fear. And they were only beginning. 1 month had passed since the Battle of Velari. The fires were out. The rubble had been cleared. Human engineers had helped the Velari begin rebuilding their destroyed cities. What had been ashes and despair was slowly becoming hope. Ambassador Telos stood in the newly constructed communications center, preparing for the most important broadcast of his life. The room was filled with holographic equipment that would transmit his words across every star system in the Galactic Accord. Billions of beings would hear what he had to say. Admiral Choi Yong-soo and Captain Kim Tae-ho stood beside him. They had refused to leave, even when the Accord demanded that all human ships withdraw from Velari space. They had stayed to protect and to help, just as they promised they would. "Are you ready?" Choi asked quietly. Telos took a deep breath. "I have never been more ready for anything in my life." The broadcast began. Telos's image appeared on screens across the galaxy. In council chambers and private homes, in ships and space stations, alien beings of 100 different species watched and waited to hear what the Velari ambassador would say. "Citizens of the Galactic Accord," Telos began, his crystalline voice carrying across the stars, "I speak to you today because of the humans of Earth. 1 month ago, my world faced extinction. The Krath Empire attacked without warning. They bombed our cities. They murdered our children. They intended to wipe us from existence." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "In our darkest hour, I sent a distress signal. It was meant to reach our allies in the Accord. It was meant to bring help from those who had sworn to protect us." His voice hardened. No one came. The Accord debated. The Accord hesitated. The Accord did nothing. Across the galaxy, counselors and leaders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But someone did come. Someone heard our cry and answered. Not our allies, not our friends. The signal reached a species we had locked away for 100 years, a species we called dangerous and violent, a species we feared so much that we quarantined their entire sector of space. Telos turned to look at the two human officers standing beside him. The humans came. They came with 400 warships and destroyed the Krath fleet in a single battle. They came with soldiers and medics and engineers who worked without rest to save our people. They came without being asked. They came without expecting anything in return. He faced the camera again. "For a century, the Accord has told stories about humanity. We called them Deathworlders. We said they were monsters. We warned each other that they would destroy anything they touched. We believed that locking them away was the only way to keep ourselves safe." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "We were wrong." The words hung in the air. "I have watched humans for the past month. I have seen them pull survivors from rubble with their bare hands. I have seen them share their food with hungry children. I have seen them work until they collapsed from exhaustion, then get up and work some more. I have seen soldiers who could kill without mercy instead choose to heal without question." Telos stepped closer to the camera. "Yes, humans are dangerous. They come from a world that tried to kill them every single day. They evolved through violence and struggle and endless hardship. They can be frightening. They can be brutal. When they choose to fight, they are unstoppable. But that is not all they are. Humans are also kind. They are generous. They are loyal. They will protect strangers who have never shown them anything but fear. They will sacrifice themselves for people they have never met. They will stand against evil even when they have every reason to walk away." Telos turned to Admiral Choi. "This man commanded the fleet that saved my world. He lost ships and soldiers defending people who had locked his species away for a century. When I asked him why he came, do you know what he said?" He looked back at the camera. He said, "Because you needed help. That was reason enough." A long silence followed. "The Galactic Accord's quarantine of Earth ends today. By my authority as surviving leader of the Velari Collective, I am ending our participation in any agreements that restrict human movement through the galaxy. I am extending a formal invitation to the United Earth Government to join our galactic community. Not as probationary members, not as watched suspects, as full allies and equals." Across the galaxy, reactions were mixed. Some species watched in fear, terrified of what the unleashed humans might do. Others watched with hope, impressed by what they had heard. And some watched with shame, knowing that they had done nothing while the Velari suffered. To the other members of the Accord I say this: the choice is yours. You can continue to fear the humans. You can continue to treat them as monsters. Or you can open your eyes and see what I have seen. See that strength can be used for protection. See that danger can become defense. See that the Deathworlders of Earth are not the villains of our story. Telos smiled for the first time since his world had started burning. They are the heroes we never expected. The broadcast ended. For a moment there was only silence. Then Admiral Choi placed a hand on Telos's shoulder. "Thank you, Ambassador. That took courage." "Courage?" Telos laughed softly. "I just told the truth. Your species did the hard part." On Earth, in a small apartment in the city of Neosol, an old woman named Han Sunai watched the broadcast with tears streaming down her face. She was 93 years old. She had been born during the quarantine, had grown up being told that her species was too dangerous to be trusted among the stars. Now everything was changing. Her grandson sat beside her. Han Woo-jin was 25 years old, a pilot in the Earth Defense Force. He had volunteered for the Velari relief mission but had been assigned to patrol duty instead. He wished he could have been there, could have helped. "Grandmother," he said softly, "can you believe it? After all these years they are finally accepting us." Sunai wiped her eyes and smiled. "I always knew this day would come. I always believed that eventually the galaxy would see us for what we truly are." "And what is that?" Sunai took her grandson's hand. "We are human. We are capable of terrible darkness. We have done awful things throughout our history, but we are also capable of incredible light. We can love. We can sacrifice. We can choose to be better." She looked out the window, where ships were beginning to rise into the sky. The first diplomatic mission to the Galactic Accord was departing. History was being made. "The question has never been whether we deserve the stars," Sunai said. "The question is what we will become when we reach them." Woo-jin watched the ships disappear into the clouds. "What do you think we will become?" "I do not know, but I believe in us. I believe that given the chance, we will prove the Accord wrong. We will show them that Deathworlders can be guardians, that monsters can become heroes." In the rebuilt capital of the Velari homeworld, a ceremony was taking place. Ambassador Telos was presenting medals of honor to the human soldiers who had saved his people. Lieutenant Commander Song Yun-bai stood at the front of the line, uncomfortable with the attention. When Telos placed the medal around her neck, she leaned in close. "I was just doing my job, Ambassador." Telos smiled. "Your job is to protect, and you did that better than anyone I have ever known. This medal is the least we can give you." Yun-bai looked at the medal, a simple crystal pendant that glowed with soft blue light. She thought about all the lives her team had saved, all the survivors they had pulled from the rubble, all the children they had fed and comforted. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I will wear it with honor." The ceremony continued. More medals were given. More hands were shaken. And throughout it all, human and Velari stood side by side, two species who had started as strangers and become friends. In orbit, Captain T-Ho watched from the bridge of the Eternal Horizon. His ship would be leaving soon, returning to Earth to resupply before the next mission. But he knew he would be back. He knew that humanity's relationship with the Velari was just the beginning. The Accord would resist at first. Old fears would take time to overcome. But T-Ho had seen the look in Telos's eyes when he gave that speech. He had seen the gratitude in the Velari survivors when human medics treated their wounds. He had seen something change in the galaxy. Humanity was no longer alone, and that changed everything. Commander Hwang Bora joined him at the viewport. "Captain, we have received orders from Fleet Command. We are to proceed to the Accord's central system. A formal meeting has been requested. T-Ho raised an eyebrow. The Accord wants to meet with us. It seems Ambassador Telos's speech had an effect. Several species have expressed interest in establishing diplomatic relations with Earth. Well then, T-Ho straightened his uniform. Let us not keep them waiting. The eternal horizon turned toward the stars, leading a small fleet of human vessels toward the heart of the galaxy. Behind them, the Velari homeworld grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light in the darkness. But it was a light that would never be forgotten, a light that marked the moment everything changed, a light that reminded the galaxy why the Deathworlders of Earth were not to be feared. They were to be welcomed. The SOS had been meant for allies. Instead, it had summoned humanity. And in doing so, it had given the galaxy something it never expected. Hope. Real, powerful, unstoppable hope. The Deathworlders were going home, and they were taking their place among the stars. At last,